And then I'm going to do a quick little walkthrough to make sure we're all on the same page of how to access the programs if you don't have them loaded to your own computer. So if you're on a Chromebook, this is what you would do. So you got to go to our classroom. You're going to go to down here to programs. Go down to Chromebook. If you have it on your personal computer, you should have already loaded it last time that we were loading all the programs. You're going to click on your virtual desktop. You have your CTE desktop. Username. There we go. I've clicked on these little expand arrows. And then Adobe Illustrator is what I'm going to be using, which is this program right here, the AI that says Adobe Illustrator underneath it. Okay. Let me minimize this. And I'll click on here. Cool. So I'm going to start rolling. As you guys get loaded or hop in, that's totally fine. I'll drag my feet a little bit and go fairly slow through this. But what we're going to do when we get to this start page is just like we did in Photoshop. We're going to come over here and we're going to click on Create New. And as I click on Create New, you'll see that I have this kind of start page. It looks very similar to what it was in Photoshop with a couple differences. Okay. First similarity is we have our file choice. So again, we will start with putting our last name, and then I will label this test. So put your last name and put test after you press Create New. We now have the same options we had before in terms of setting our size. The big one you need to focus on in Illustrator, which people mess up a ton, is you need to make sure your units of measure are set correctly. Okay, a lot of you might have points as the default right here. Please click on this and make sure it says inches. I'm telling you this over and over and over again. Click on this, units of measure, and make sure it says inches. Because if it says points or anything else, it's going to be really, really tiny. With our width, we are going to go 10. And with our height, we are going to go 10, making it a
What's
square.
wrong with it being tiny?
Because you won't be able to fit anything on it.
Not even a single dot?
Barely. So you want to make sure it's 10 inches by 10 inches.
Unless you like to do small art.
Amy, artboards, you don't really need to worry about. We can leave them at 1. That's a graphic design 2 thing. And then all this other stuff, we don't really need to worry about it. Now, there is an advanced options down here where I can click on and I can change my color mode to my CMYK or RGB. Okay. But we can kind of leave it default for right now. I'm not really going to worry about that. So really the main thing we got to do is label it 10 by 10 and then make sure that this says inches. Okay. Once that's done, go ahead and press create. And it will open up our canvas. All my tools are on my other screen. So let me drag these over so you can see them. Now, when this opens, it should look fairly similar to Photoshop. Main difference, though, is, well, no, actually, it's not the difference anymore. Never mind. So I can close that. I can close this. Close this. Okay, so what I have open right now is I have my toolbar over here on my left-hand side, and then I have my layers. If you don't have layers, again, just like in Photoshop, go over to Window, and then this is in alphabetical order. You can go down and click on Layers, and you can open that to be able to see it over here. Okay. Now, a couple things. Illustrator is a totally different program from Photoshop. And I have to tell you this because when I was in college, I remember messing around with Photoshop. I had done some cool projects, stuff like that. And then I took a class that was focused on Illustrator, but I hadn't had the intro class to it. I was like, I can figure it out. And I tried to do it on my own, and it just threw me for a loop because I wasn't really conceptualizing what it was. Okay.
Wait, you can skip the before. You can skip how high you are in the classes.
Don't worry about that, Amy. It was just something that happened when I was in college. Yes, you can.
Oh, cool.
So what happened was I started working in it, and it totally threw me for a loop because it's set in a different type of what do I usually call it? It's a different focus. Okay, so what Photoshop is Photoshop is a pixel-based program, which we've talked about before, right? If you zoom in really close to an image in Photoshop, you can see all the little tiny pixels that are made. Well, Illustrator is not a pixel-based program. Illustrator is a vector-based program, okay? VECTOR. And a vector-based program means we're going to be working more in shapes than we are in pixels. The analogy that I give for this, and kind of like it kind of hopefully click in your guys' heads, for those of you that have in preschool or Sunday school or anything like that, have ever used a felt board, which is like a piece of felt, and then you have like little felt like animals or houses, and you can kind of stick the felt on the felt board. It's kind of like that. Kind of like building things with stickers, okay? It's all shapes. There's no values, no transitions, no blends to this, okay? So with that being said, our tools are slightly different. I'm going to open this so I can see my full toolbar. So up here at the top, we don't have that move tool anymore like we did in Photoshop. Now we have these two arrows. The empty one is called my selection tool. It's your dark arrow. So you see my cursor turns black. The white arrow is my direct select tool. Okay. Now, as kind of a default, I usually keep my direct select tool on all the time because of the things that it allows you to do. Okay. If you think back to Photoshop, I believe we covered it in Photoshop. If I hold Control, it's Control on a PC, and I believe it's the Apple button on a Mac. If I hold Control, it flips that white arrow to the black arrow. So it takes my direct select tool and it turns it into a selection tool. So that's really important because we're going to be laying down shapes and adjusting the shapes and moving those shapes. Okay. We have some other tools that I'm not going to get into right now. But the first one that we are going to get to is down here. It's about what, like 8, see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 boxes down is my rectangle tool. Just like in Photoshop, if there's a little tiny arrow down in the corner, that means if you click and hold on it, there's more tools underneath it. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to click and hold on my rectangle tool, and I'm going to come out here to this arrow on the far outside. I'm still holding my mouse, and I'm going to release on this arrow. You see what happens is it takes all those tools and it rips it off for me. So now I can come out here and click on these independently instead of clicking and holding over and over and over again. Okay. So please with me, go ahead and if you're available to, go ahead and click on your rectangle tool. And then what I want you to do is come to your canvas and you're just going to click and drag a rectangle. It should end up looking like this. Now, if you click and drag this and your black line around your rectangle like I have, if it's really, really, really thick, that means that you probably didn't change your file to inches and that you're on points instead, and it's a really, really small file. Any of you have that problem where this looks super, super, super thick? Sorry, Hinos, I missed your question. Can you do what in Photoshop? Click and pull off your tools? Yeah, I believe you can. So with now with this shape, if I click on it, I can move it around like my move tool would do back in Photoshop. Sorry, Ty, how did I make the rectangle? Yeah, you're going to use your rectangle tool. So click your box right here, your rectangle tool, and then I'm going to click and then drag. As I'm holding my mouse, I'm going to drag it and then let it go, and that will make my rectangle. Okay, so I have my shape with my white arrow. I can click and I can move it around. You see also up here in layer 1, I have this little box because my shape here is in layer 1. Now, as we're working with shapes, this is a little bit different, like I said, from Photoshop. This shape that we have here in front of us is actually a white box with a black line around the outside of it. And our colors down here that you see they look like Photoshop, but it's actually a little bit different. So the color on the left, if you hover over it, it shows you, is what we call our fill color, which means that's going to be the color that's the inside of your shape. The color on the right is our stroke color. Okay, so if I double click on the white, my little color box pops up, and I'll click on this color right here. I press OK. You see what happens is it changes the fill color of my shape. I can still move my shape around, but it changes that fill. Okay. I can double click on the stroke, and I can change that color as well. So it's hard to see it, but I have a green on the outside of my like magenta color. Okay. Also, as I move this around, I can change not just the fill color, but I can change underneath these colors. See, there's a color box, there's a gradient box, and a none box. So I'm going to take my colors back to black and white by clicking on this little default button up here. Yeah, see where I'm at right above my colors. If I click there, it'll take me back to default. And then what I'm going to do is on my fill color, I'm actually going to make a gradient. So I'm going to go like this. And it says, wow, it's a gradient. So you can kind of play around with it and do some cool things with it, okay? Now, let me go back to my default. Now, let me show you this. If I want to get rid of my shape, I select it, and I press backspace. Boop, it's gone. Simple as that. I can also, if I want to make multiple shapes, I can go like that and make multiple shapes and see how they kind of overlap each other. If I want to delete them, I just press backspace, but I have to reselect them as I go if I want to delete them. Or, some of you jumped ahead on this already, I can click and drag a box with my arrow that selects all of them, and then I press backspace, and they're all gone. Okay. Now, don't worry about doing this along with me, but let me show you something real quick. Sorry, I have to open up Photoshop. Okay. here's this main difference that I was talking about. Let me jump over to Photoshop real quick. So here's a canvas, 10 inches by 10 inches in Photoshop. I'm going to take my paintbrush and make it larger. And I'm going to take the hardness of the edge of my brush all the way up to 100. And then I'm just going to click a paint circle right here. Oops. My flow is down. There you go. Like we did before, I'll zoom into my hard edge. And the closer we get, we then start to see all of these little tiny pixels. Right? So in Photoshop, or sorry, in Illustrator, what I will do is I will click and drag. And I will make a circle. And my circle, I will make my fill color black. So it looks just like my Photoshop shape was. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my zoom tool and I'm going to zoom in. And as you see, as we zoom and zoom and zoom and zoom, there are no pixels whatsoever. I'm all the way in. No pixels at all because we're working in vectors. They're shapes, solid shapes, which is why I love Illustrator so much because it's super clean and I hate the dirtiness that comes with pixels sometimes. So when you're thinking about graphics, and you want something to look really, really nice and really sharp, say like typefaces, okay? You want typography to look really nice and really clean. You're probably going to try to do it in Illustrator instead because you're not going to have pixels. If you're going to paint something really, really, really big, like a billboard or something like that, you're probably going to do a lot of it on Illustrator because all these lines and edges are going to be super, super sharp, okay? Again, we're working with shapes. We're not working with pixels. So transition that in our brains, okay? Now, let me go like this. I have my arrow. I select it. I press backspace. I'm going to go back to my rectangles.
Why are we in Photoshop if we're not doing anything?
We're not in Photoshop.
Shapes. You know, our program.
Sorry, we're in Illustrator to build shapes. I'll cover it. Don't worry.
Okay.
So what's going on now is I can go play with all these different shapes and I can add a bunch of them. We're just going through some of the basic stuff right now to make sure we can know how it all functions. So I have all these different shapes and like Photoshop did before, you see that we have it all in the layer. But now the frustrating thing, especially in Photoshop, is as you remember, if you painted, 8 different lines on if you painted 8 different lines on the paper, you couldn't move those lines unless they were on individual layers, right? Well, in Illustrator, if we look right here in layer 1, I have all these little boxes in my thumbnail. But what Illustrator does for us that I really, really like that Photoshop does not do is every time I put a shape on this, it drops it into its own sublayer. So look at the anatomy of my layers. We have our eyeball, which we had in Photoshop. You can turn your layer off or on. We have the name of the layer. We have the selection little circle over here. But see this little arrow? If I click on that, all of these shapes that I made are now in sublayers. And as you see, if I make more shapes, so I'll make a couple ellipses, like ovals. As I make these, it keeps adding them to sublayers. Okay. Another anatomical thing that's really important to understand here is that this blue line on the side is a way for the program to categorize everything in the same layer. So as you see, as I select these shapes, they all have a little blue outline to them. Okay. And as I select these, you can see that they all fall under this layer, but also look on the outside, this little blue box. As I click on a shape, that blue box jumps to the layer that the shape is on. So for instance, say I just wanted to get rid of the farthest back box. Instead of trying to click on all these to find it, I can just click on this little circle on the right-hand side. That's where it is. I press backspace. That layer's gone. Really nice from an organizational standpoint. It helps you kind of figure out where everything is, especially if they're all overlapping to some extent. Okay, say I go like this. And that's all fun and good, but I have this ellipse over here somewhere. I think it's, yes, it's there. And I want to take that ellipse and I want to change, because it's selected now, I want to change the color of that selection so it can stand out on all of the black shapes to that. Cool. Because that is on top of all those rectangles. Well, what if I want to try to push it behind one of the rectangles? Well, then I can go like this. See, there's one rectangle there. And there's one rectangle above it. So I'm going to go right in between these two, and I'm going to drag this shape down in between the two. And now it's like that. So it really helps kind of organize this whole thing. Okay. If I want none of this, I can just click and drag a box with my white arrow around all of it. You see it's all selected now, and I press backspace, and it's all cleaned up. Okay. One other little fun thing with this. Let's say I go square, 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 or rectangles. And then I'm going to click on this little new layer tab. And that's the same one that we had in Photoshop. Well, look at the difference. I have layer 2 now, but layer 2 is red. And the shape that I make is red. The purpose of that is to make sure that we can know what shapes are on what layers. Again, this is adding all these little drop shapes in my layer 2. And if I press a new layer again, this one's green. So I'll go with my ovals again. Now I have all of these that are green in my sublayers.
What if you run out of colors for the rainbow?
It won't. There's a project that we might not get to, but it'll. I've had students have upwards of like 500 layers, and you got a whole big thing to work with. All we did, Hinos, is just made a new layer, so it automatically changes it for you as you make a new layer. So the first one is a default. The first one's always blue. Second one's always red. Then it goes green, and it kind of varies from there. Now, the problem, though, Hinos, is and this will come into a later project, but say I'm working with this shape, and I go with my fill color, and my fill color is this. And I'm like, you know what? It's kind of hard to see that stroke color because it's the same one, right? But I want to make sure that I keep using this color. I can come to my layer and double click on it. I can change the name if I want, but I can also come here and I can change the color. So I can go to let's see, a burgundy. And now that layer will be a burgundy. See that? So that's another way that you can kind of change that color if you really want to. Okay. It also helps me because now I can go select all of layer 3. So I'm going to click on this little circle on the right hand side. I'll click there. Now all of layer 3 is selected. I'm going to go ahead and make sure all of layer 3 is this green color. Like that. And then I'm going to select all of layer 2. And I'm going to make all of layer 2 a pink color.
What if you want half of layer 2 to be pink and half to be blue?
You can do that on layer 2, but you can't select it like this. What you have to do is you select each one of these, and you have to hold Control to select multiple shapes. So now, see, I have these 3 down here on the bottom selected. I have those 3 selected together, so I can come here. I can go to the blue and go like that, and now they're blue. To go on top of that, Amy, I can also, if I wanted to go with multiple shapes, say, I'm not even going to worry about the layers, but I want like this shape, and this shape to all be different color. I can click on one. I'll hold Control. Click on, okay, sorry, Shift, my fault. I hold Shift, click on another one. Hold Shift, click on the other one. Now see how there's 2 in this layer, and there's 1 in this layer. And now I can, and there's a question mark here. It's a question mark for the fill color because it's like, I don't know what color it is because there's multiple colors selected. So now I can go like that, double click. I'm going to make this one a boring like gray and press OK. And now I'm there. Okay, so we can kind of play with this whole thing. We can move the layers around still. I can move the sub layers from layer to layer. So these grays are all behind everything. Say I want to take this gray and move it up to the top. I can do that if I would like. Okay. I'm going to change the colors of these ones down here just so we can see them a little bit more. Okay. And then the final thing that I haven't gone over yet is our stroke. Okay. So again, the fill is this color on the left. The other color on the right is our stroke. So if I want to double click here and I'm going to make, so let's make it black. Nope, that's not black. Now you see it's only affecting one of my shapes because I only have one shape selected. I can add that stroke. Now follow with me real quick, and this is what we're going to do. Go up to Window, and then alphabetically, you're going to go down to Stroke. And now I have this stroke box. If yours doesn't have this whole bottom on it, it just means that you have to go unhide your options. So if it looks like this, that's fine. But go ahead and click on Show Options on this little lines. Now it'll look like that. And what you can do is I can take the weight of my selected shape. So right now I have this red shape selected. It has a black stroke on it. And I'm going to take the weight of my stroke up. And what that does is it allows us to add an outline to our shape. There's some options down here. There's a cap, which means what the shape looks like at the end of it. So if I rounded my cap, it doesn't do anything because we don't have the end of our line, but I can do it to my corners. So I can round the joint of my corner, which gives it a round corner, or I can keep it sharp, or I can do what's called a bevel joint, which is a flat edge off the edge, which is nice. Also, the alignment of my stroke, the default is our stroke aligns to the center, which means it expands out and in as you adjust your numbers. But if you would like to make it only go in, click on the align inside or the align outside if you want it to go out. And see, like if I go like this, now it doesn't go in at all, and it's purely an outline. Or I can click on the other one, and it's purely a fill. And it goes like that. So I can play with all these as well. I can highlight all of these shapes with my white arrow. I'm going to add a stroke that is black to all of these shapes. And I'm going to make all of the stroke weights 9. Okay. So that's how we can kind of play with this. by moving these things around. We have our layers and kind of covered almost all of this stuff. Now, going back to our arrows. How much time we have? Perfect. Our direct select arrow, or white arrow, if you're a note taker, it allows us to select individual anchor points, lines, and shapes. Anchor points, and you don't really know what those are yet. We'll get to those in a little bit later. But individual anchor points, lines, and shapes. Okay, so like all these individual things I can move. I can click them in the middle, and I can move them around. If I mess up something, and all I got to do is press Control Z, it'll undo it. As different from Photoshop, you can Control Z back a ton in this one, or Control Shift Z to redo it. Okay, now the black arrow, the selection tool, that's a little bit different because what that will do is that'll select your whole shape, but it also gives you automatically a bounding box. Okay, automatically gives you a bounding box. Think back to Photoshop. When we would go edit, transform, we changed the size of our stuff. We used a bounding box. So when I have my black arrow, it automatically gives me this bounding box, and I can click and I can adjust my shape now. Okay. So my black arrow, I can stretch this out. I can come click on this, and I can stretch this out. The secret key in Illustrator, and this used to be in Photoshop too, but they changed Photoshop in the 2020 upgrade. The secret key when we're adjusting our shapes or text or really anything else is we have to hold the shift key. Okay? Because watch what happens. This says, as I get my selection tool, Illustrator says, okay, you want to change your shape. So the size of the shape. But I want to change the size. I don't want to change the actual shape itself. So what happens is if I hold shift, it locks its ratio and it only adjusts the size. So it's not going to change the actual shape itself. Okay. So I can let go of my mouse first, and now it's here. I want to take this circle and I want to keep it a circle. That is not how you keep it a circle. Okay. I got to make sure that I click and hold shift when I drag it, and then that will make it stay a circle. You also see that as I drag these shapes around, I can take them off the canvas. In Photoshop, you weren't allowed to do that. If you put something off the canvas, it disappeared. This one, you can take these things off the canvas. And the main reason why that's important is you can overlap things. And we'll go over this later, but when you save something, it'll crop to the canvas. So you won't worry about anything on the outside, which is kind of fun. There's an automatic crop for you. Okay. So what your assignment's going to be for today with Illustrator open, you just need to throw together a file, put some shapes on here. Show me you can use your shapes. All right. Just to go through the shapes. This is our rounded rectangle. It's pretty cool. You can do the same thing though to a regular rectangle. If I take a rectangle like this, I can click on this little box in the corner, and that will round my corner for me all the way down to almost a circle. So I can go like that if I would like. But you have your rounded rectangles, one of them. You have your oval. If I want to, this is getting kind of cluttered. Hold on. I'm going to take my direct select tool, get rid of all of it. Going back to my shift button. If I make a rectangle, but I want it to be a square, I hold shift. And that makes it a perfect square. If I have an oval, but I want it to be a perfect circle, I hold shift. It makes it a perfect circle. Okay. So I can do that. I have my my ellipse tool, my polygon tool, my star tool. I can make a star. if I hold, let's see, control with my star dragging, I can adjust the sharpness of the edge of my star by holding control as I drag. And I believe if I hold, what is it? There's another one. I can't remember what it was. There's another way to give more prongs to the star. But I have my star tool. You don't have to use this one. This is like my least favorite tool in the world ever in Illustrator. It's called the flare tool. And what you do is you click here, and then it adds like this crazy, weird sun flare effect, which is it's just dumb. I don't like it at all. This is my own personal preference, so don't worry about that one. But you have your all these shapes that you can utilize. Okay, we can move these around. We can change the stroke color. We can change the fill color. So what I want you to do is I want you to put a couple shapes down, and I want you to save the file and turn it into me so I can see that you understand how to add some shapes, add some layers, play with the colors, some of the basic stuff that we went over today, and then that will be your assignment for the rest of the class period today. Okay, very, very simple, very straightforward. It should be titled Your Last Name and Test, and that will be turned in. And then tomorrow we will go into our first Illustrator assignment. Questions you guys have? Ads for miss. Good job, you know. I like that one. Cool. So if you guys don't have any questions, that's all we have. Go ahead and you can hop off and start working on this. It shouldn't take you very long. Like we got 10 minutes left in class. I'm not going to tell you how we do the flare, Drew. The flare is the devil. We're not going to do that at all. So what we'll do is you'll have 10 minutes to throw something together, turn it in when I have the assignment posted, and I will see y'all tomorrow. Welcome back. Good to see you guys.